Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. All right, everyone. So today we're looking at these predictive techniques, and one of the things that I really noticed. Okay, well, first of all, I just want to kind of start with the fact that you all know that I'm really involved with Vedic astrology, and I'll be 100% clear with you. I still think that the Dasha Bhukti system is the most accurate predictive system available. But since we're dealing with Western astrology, we're not going to look at that. We're not going to be talking about Dasha Bhukti or any of the Vedic systems at all. We're going to basically, but we are going to look at something that is kind of like the Dasha Bhukti system, which is called the Firdaria or the Fredaria. And then we'll look at some of the, and we'll look also at Zodiacal Releasing, which is also somewhat similar. And then we will look at Profections and Profections within the context of the solar return, which is already kind of part of what we were doing in our traditional astrology course. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I think we've all talked about the fact, oh, good, Christopher's coming. Hey, Christopher, welcome. We're just getting started, so your timing is perfect. Okay, so what I was going to basically say is one of the things that I tend to really see in modern Western astrology is that there's almost a complete kind of dependency on transits. And I'm not necessarily to say that I don't think transits really matter, but I don't really think transits matter as much as they do. And one of the things that you see a lot on Reddit is, hey, I just had this transit happen and nothing happened. Or, hey, my Jupiter return happened and nothing happened. Or my Saturn return happened and I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing with my life. Or whatever, right? And so I think that we're overusing transits. I think that we're overusing transits, and I'm going to kind of show how that might indeed be the case with the two. I'm only going to use two sample charts today. And in those two charts, we'll maybe get a chance to see the fact that, hey, you know what? That's not real. It doesn't look like the transit chart is really indicating quite as much as people might want it to be. Now, I'm not saying that transits don't matter. Certainly, I told you all about when I had when Mars was transiting my fourth house and my moon by retrograde. Now, mind you, remember, retrograde transits tend to be stronger. And so when Mars was retrograding over my moon and over my IC, I moved here to Mexico. So I thought that, and also the whole thing about where was I going to move and finally deciding to move, where was I going to move was when it was in 5 degrees of the IC. And when I finally decided to move, it was within 1 or 2 degrees of the IC. I moved when it was on the IC, etc. And then it went direct and it went back over the IC and I moved to Tulum. So that does it. So I'm not saying that I don't think transits matter at all. What I do think is that one, we overuse them, and two, that we overestimate their efficacy. So right now, what we're going to start with, and we should all be looking at these things for ourselves in our own chart. And and after we look at the two charts that I have as sample charts, then you can put the Gary Webb chart forward if you want to, or if you'd rather look at your own charts, pick out some important date of your own or something like that, and we can try to figure out things in response to that as well. So the first thing this is something that I discovered when I started reading I think it's the Mashallah on solar revolutions. And I had never really heard of this Ptolemaic Ages of Man, but it's a kind of a major thing that it was used in the medieval period. And so as you can see, each planet represents a stage of life. So moon from 0 to 4. And we talked about it in the traditional astrology course, when we talked about the Ptolemaic Ages of Man, and how, of course, when you have this moon period, it's when we basically form as people. We start to be able to sense. We start to be able to be ambulatory, etc. Mercury represents our school years, 4 to 14. So our primary school years to the beginning of adolescence. Venus represents adolescence, when the hormones start happening and we start getting horny, and boys are walking hard on during that time. Girls girls are having their period, etc. So there's the kind of the gateway. Well, of course, lots of girls are now having their period a lot earlier. But, 12, 13, 14 used to be the usual time that a girl could be, that a young girl could be expected to come on to her menstruation. And of course, that's the beginning of womanhood. Venus represents women. And that's also the beginning of fertility, right? It's the beginning of Venusian fertility, sex, the kind of openness to sex that then brings children. And of course, that's when we have often when we have our first boyfriends or girlfriends. That's often when we lose our virginity for the first time, etc. So think about, Venus is kind of that time period. Of course, it's different in every country that you're in. The sun, of course, remember the sun represents achievement and fame and kingdom. And so that 22 to 41 period is where we try to kind of create our kingdom. We try to build our kingdom, and we try to come into some kind of prominence or of career. And then Mars from 41 to 56, that's when we're kind of what I call fighting to keep our career going, right? 41 to 56 is when younger people can come into our industry and take things from us. Right, or rather from 41 to 51, usually that should be a very good time in a person's career. So that's kind of the culmination of the career. And then, we've heard certainly of people from 50 on, or even from 47 or 48 on, who are subject to age discrimination and get fired from their jobs or laid off or whatever. Then, of course, 56 to 68 is the beginning of the end of life. And also, this is the time period when most Indian men turn away from material life and start to, they either become a sannyasin completely, or they kind of start to focus their lives towards God, which makes quite a good sense. And then, obviously, Saturn, which is the significator for death, represents the remainder of life. So the first 4 years, Moon, 10 years for Mercury, 8 years for Venus, 19 years for the Sun, 15 years for Mars, 12 years for Jupiter, and then Saturn for the remainder. Now, you should be looking at how old you are and in which age. Most of you should be within the Sun age, but we may have some people. I myself just left the Mars age. I just turned 56, so I'm now in my Jupiter age. And so what Ben Dyke says about using the Ptolemaic ages of man is, one, you look to see where they are in every solar return, but then you also look to see any transits to that specific planet. And so one of the things that he mentioned in his introduction to on solar revolutions is that this might be a key to why some transits work and some transits don't. Right, so the transits to the Ptolemaic ages of man, the transits to, we're going to talk about perfection in a second, to the perfected Lord of the Year, the transits to other particular things, those might actually be the most functional at the particular time, but not necessarily the ones that, not necessarily every transit at every time. Black indeed, don't crack. Yeah, she said, you're 56. She goes, don't, she goes, wow, black don't crack. No, it don't. No, it don't. And I even have this great beard. And I met a guy at the grocery store. This little. Now I do this Gemini. And remember, I've got Mercury on the ascendant. So that's the other thing. I have Mercury on the ascendant, and my chart ruler is in Gemini. So anything that's kind of representing my body, and that it's all kind of around Gemini, which is why I still look like, which is why when this stuff is off, I can still maybe pass for 35 or 40, or something like that. But, oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Yes, exactly. Why Layla Akbar looks 12, exactly. So this is something to think about as far as transits are concerned. There may be specific planets that are important, and as a result, those planets are the ones for which the transits are the most efficacious. So something you should be writing this down if you don't already have it. And we've talked about this before, but I do like to start with this because this is a very easy kind of way to look at things. And also, when I think about my life, when I go backwards and I look at my life, I can really kind of see certainly the Venus period especially was a very difficult period, and a very difficult period around love and relationships and unrequited love and things of that nature. and et cetera. So I think it's a very good thing to kind of be researching and looking at. The first step is to determine the native's age according to the Ptolemaic ages of man, and to analyze the planet ruling that age, both natally and by transit. So we're going to look at the local determination, and I think Ava might be the only person here who might not have heard the term local determination yet. And basically, the local determination represents the condition of the planet by sign occupancy and house occupancy, house rulership, and the aspects made to it, right? So for instance, let's say we use Venus. So Venus, if she's in Virgo and she's Casimir and she's opposing Mars, and she rules the seventh and the second, and or something like that, right? So that would be an aspect of the local determination. And so once again, we would always look at it at its position in the solar return, and then we would always look at transits to that specific planet for the entire time that we run that age. So those of you, how many of you are in the sun age, the 22 to 41? Are you all, I think probably everybody but Ava and me are probably in that age. Is that right? Patrick, yeah. Okay, yeah, Sonia. Okay, so Layla, yes, definitely the two Laylas. All right. So here we move now to Profections. Now, even if I look older, Saturn rule. No, Saturn rule. No, I don't think you look older, Layla. I don't think you look older at all. Okay, so
I'll show you my gray hair sometime.
Oh, well, I mean, I've been gray for years, and still, I don't think you look old at all. I mean, you don't look 12 like Layla Akbar, but you don't look older, so to speak. So okay, so perfection is when we basically advance or perfect. Perfect means to advance, and actually there is a lot of the 11th house, which is called the pars profectus, which basically means to advance, or to move forward, or to profit. So it's used it's used to profit, but it really means to advance, to move forward. And of course, we've been talking about the concept of advancement within the concept of angular and succeeding houses. But now we're actually advancing a certain point through the chart. So it's the advancement of a natal point around the chart, standardly at a rate of 1 house per year. By house, I mean a whole sign house that is a sign. For it seems that the older Hellenistic approach to perfections used whole sign houses, right? But by the Arabic period, astrologers such as blah, 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 advocated for equal houses. So instead of moving from sign to sign, we move in 30-degree increments. So what I would say is when we're using perfections, no matter what your chart looks like, so if you have interceptions in the chart or whatever, no matter what your chart looks like, you're always moving things forward 30 degrees. And we're going to when we get to this stuff, we're going to kind of look at some of these examples. So for instance, let's say we decide we're going, and you can perfect anything. And a matter of fact, not only can you perfect anything, but everything perfects. So the entire chart perfects every year. So that's something that I tend to notice in Reddit, and that's actually why I wrote my little thing about perfection for Reddit, was that people were saying, oh, well, what about my love life? And it's like, well, you want to know about your love life, then you perfect your 7th house. Oh, sorry. Then you would perfect your 7th house. So for instance, if it's an Aries rising chart and you are 25, then not only does your ascendant move forward 1, or let's say you're 13, right? So let's make it really easy, right? So there are 12 houses, and the first house, as a matter of fact, let me just come to an example to make it easier. Okay, so this is a solar return, but we're actually, maybe we can, where's the whole sun? There we go. Okay, this is one of the charts we're going to use. And so let's say Billie Holiday is 12 or is 13. So the first house would represent 0 to 1. So from birth to 1. And this 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to, is that right? No, it should be, that should bring us to 11. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, that's right. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The 12th house should bring us to 11. And so the ascendant should always be year 0, the year of birth, year 12, year 24, year 36, year 48, year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so every important 12, division of 12 or multiplication of 12 happens on the ascendant. If Billie Holiday is 13, or when Billie Holiday was 13, her ascendant and the entire chart perfected one sign forward. So now, she'd be 13 in 1928. So in 1928, the perfected ascendant is Pisces, which means the perfected 7th house is Virgo. Right, so we wouldn't only just perfect the ascendant. What's happening is most people are saying, "Oh, I'm in a perfected 9th house year. What does that mean for my love life?" And it's like, well, did you check to see your perfected 7th house for the year? Because that means that your 3rd house is now the 7th house. So that's basically the way to be looking at perfections. It's not really particularly difficult. And if you see, I've been using the whole sign charts for this perfection thing, because as I mentioned, if there's an intercepted house, we would still use that sign, right? We wouldn't skip to the next cusp. We would absolutely use every single sign. Okay, so just wanted to is there any question about that so far? We're going to get into what it means, what to do with it, and all that stuff, but is there any question on that at the moment? Great. Okay, so this is from my material on the perfection and solar return, and it kind of talks about what you would be doing, what you would be looking at from a medieval standpoint when you were looking at the solar return. And certainly the solar return is one of the predictive techniques. It's not specifically one of the ones that I was going to use, but it's interesting. As I was looking at transit charts for 2 of the dates that I chose, I thought, maybe the solar return shows it more. And sure enough, the solar return showed it more. So once again, we're going to look at how maybe transits are not quite as necessary as we think they are. Certainly, the ancient astrologers did not necessarily use them very much. What they did, however, that's correct and incorrect, because they used them off all the time, because if you're reading a horary chart and answering your question, you're using the transits of the time. If you're electing a chart, you're using the transits of the time. You're just not using the, and even if you're using an electional chart, you're also trying to center or root the election around your natal chart, right? So if, for instance, somebody is getting married, maybe you want to put their natal 7th house on the ascendant, right? And so that kind of connects what you're doing with the actual person. However, okay, so we would look at the Ptolemaic ages of man, right, which we already have. We would look at the perfected ascendant and its lord, which is called the Saul Kudai. We would look at, we're not going to look at this today, the distributor and its partner. And so the distributor is the lord of the term, right? So remember, we have what? We've got domicile, we've got exaltation, we've got triplicity, we've got term, we've got face. So the main way in which the term ruler was used was it was used to distribute, or to not necessarily perfect, but to direct or distribute. But we're not going to look at that today. And then obviously the solar revolution or solar return, noting especially where the calculated ascendant of the year falls in the nativity. So of course, wherever the perfected ascendant starts, then you're going to look for that in the solar return. What its lord is, you're going to look for the lord of the perfected ascendant in the solar, or the lord of the year in the solar return. And obviously any planets transiting, the planets that are in it, and any planets transiting the solar return, right? So you're going to look at any planets actually transiting the solar return. So here's a question. Is it more important to look at transits to the solar return than to look at transits to the natal chart? One of the things I remember from Robert Zoller's course, is he talked about how instead of using lunar returns based on your natal position, that you should be using the lunar return based on the solar return position. So that's kind of an example, or that kind of it kind of fits into what it is that we're talking about. The lords of the Fredaria, which we're going to look at Fredaria today, and then transits at and throughout the solar revolution, particularly if a planet returns to its natal sign, and the moon at and throughout the solar return. Okay, so those are the main things that we would be looking for as far as putting profections together with the solar return. Now, we're also going to look at profections just on their own because they can be used just by themselves, but they're especially effective when they are used in tandem with the solar return. Okay, so any questions on this before we, I mean, I'm going to continue to explain, but just in case. And so then the next thing we come to are, so I'm kind of just introducing us to everything. So we come to Fredaria, and I almost wonder if, hey, now I'm going to ask you all a question and tell me what you think. Would you prefer that I kind of go through the techniques and then use all of the techniques we talk about on the chart, or would you prefer that I look at a chart with the technique that I mentioned right after? What do you think? You can come off mute. You don't have to do it the latter. Oh, you would okay. So
Yeah.
Kabir,
I think it would consolidate the information better, because then you can see it, and if you have a question, you can ask about that particular aspect right then.
Okay, perfect. Second option. Okay,
yes, I think that's good.
Okay, thank you, fantastic. All right. So what we will do. Okay. So what I want to. So then the chart that I want to start with is I want to start with Leontyne Price. And so I've chosen Leontyne Price and Billie Holiday. Interestingly enough, both of them are Aquarius rising charts. And both of them have stelliums, or we don't call them stelliums, we call them assemblies. Both of them have assemblies in the second house. And the reason I chose both of those charts is because I know quite a bit about their biography. And so the time period that I chose for, the specific date that I chose for Leontyne Price was the date of her Metropolitan Opera debut, which is January 27, 1961. The date that I chose for Billie Holiday is May 16, 1947, which is the date on which she was arrested for drug possession. So, so what we'll do is we're going to perfect this chart to that date. And so what we would do, as you know, each sign is a year, right? So this is, let's say she's 24, so this is her 24th year, her 25th year, 26th, etc. But then also, once we get to that year, that becomes, let me start this way. First of all, let's find the year we're looking for. We're looking for January of 1961. Now look, she was born in February of 1927. So that means that in order for this to go year to year to year to year, we actually have to, we will actually end this, we will get to the end of the profection in order to find this year, right? So January of 1927 is the end of her year, right? February 10 is the beginning. So January 27 of 1961 is the end of the 1960-61 profection year. February 10, 1961 is the beginning of the 1961-1962 profection year. So ultimately, this is happening at the end of the profection year for 1960, okay? So in 1960, Leontyne Price was 33. This is 24. This is very good. 0, 12, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 22, 32, 33. Excellent, Layla Kabir. So yes, it's the 10th, brings us to the 10th house, which makes sense. So let me just give a little background about Leontyne Price as far as this Metropolitan Opera thing is concerned. First of all, Leontyne Price is the very first African-American operatic prima donna. And really, she becomes prima donna while she's at the Metropolitan Opera. This is really important because essentially we can look at operatic lives or operatic people as parts of lineages, right? So we talked about Luciano Pavarotti, we've talked about Leontyne Price before, but Leontyne Price, and especially the repertoire she's known for, there are other people before her, illustrious people before her, who sang those same roles at the same place. And so as a result of of her great talent, she comes into the lineage as the next really important, like really the most important kind of prima donna, because of the kind of repertoire she sang, which was the heavier Italian repertoire. So the repertoire of Verdi and Puccini, things like Aida, like Tosca, etc., things like that. So, and she sang the prima donna roles. Donna Anna and Mozart's Don Giovanni, Aida and Aida, things of that nature. So these are really, really important roles and really, really kind of the pinnacle of operatic singing, especially the late 19th century and 20th century, going into the 20th century. So it already makes sense that she would be in a 10th house year perfection, right? And also she had come up, she'd been coming up and coming up and coming up, and really this Met debut is the culmination for her of all of the successes. She'd been succeeding in Europe. She'd had some successes in America, but then she went to Europe and she just had success after success after success until finally the Met, the Met had tried to have her come in before, but they had said, no, we don't want her to come in singing that role. And then finally they decided, yes, come and do it now. And she did. And believe it or not, Leontyne Price received the longest ovation in Metropolitan Opera history on the date of her debut. So this is a really, really huge moment, a huge thing. And for the next, she sang there from 1961 until 1985. So for the next 24, 25 years, she is really the major important prima donna of the Metropolitan Opera. So now, okay, so as I mentioned, each sign would represent a year, but we can also split it into months. So now each sign becomes a month, starting with Scorpio, right? Because Scorpio means we start at February 10, 1960, right? So this is February, this is March, this is April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Here we are, January 1961. Okay, so January 1961. And look at how it's Libra and the part of fortune is there, right? And then look at where Venus is. Venus is exalted with Jupiter. So already, so we know that pretty much whenever a profection is probably going to come to some kind of, excuse me, when a profection is going to come to some kind of a thing that represents Venus, more than likely it's going to be pretty good. It's going to be a pretty important and interesting situation, partially because of the local determination of Venus. Venus is exalted. Venus is in the second house, which represents the voice, with Mercury, who represents the voice. Venus is with a benefic planet, right? So this is the local determination of the chart. Venus is the ruler of the part of fortune. We talked about part of fortune 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. She's the ruler of the ninth house and the fourth house as well. So this person, this should be an auspicious profection depending on what the solar return looks like. Yes? So this brings us to what? January 10, 1927. Now what we can also do is we can profect for days. Each sign is 2.5 days. So every 2 signs is 5 days. So here's the 10th of January. Here's the 15th of January. Here's the 20th of January. Is that right? Yeah, here's the 20th of January. What's that? 2.5, like the moon, yes. Wait, now I lost. Now I got lost. That's 5 days. There's the 15th.
Sorry, Garth.
there's the 20th. Here's the 25th, and here's the 27th. There's the 27th. So that's Taurus, and look who's in the sign of Taurus. The ruler of the 10th house is in the sign of Taurus, even though he's in detriment. And who rules Taurus? This very same Venus. This very same Venus. Now, we can then look at the solar return for this. Here we go. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Hey, Christopher, did the addition sign mean me too?
Yes, very mind blown.
Oh my God, look at the Venus though in that solar return.
Look at it in the solar return in the 11th.
It's besieged.
It is besieged. Isn't that interesting? So that's true. It's besieged in the 11th. So you wouldn't think that maybe that would be such a good thing. But she's besieged by two planets that are what?
Dignified.
Dignified.
Yeah. And what do we know about malefic planets when they're dignified?
They are functional benefics.
They're functional benefics, exactly. Or they basically, their evil is basically taken under control. So this is a workaholics chart. This is a workaholic year, right? Remember we talked about Mars and Capricorn, how almost always that shows a workaholic. So this is somebody, one of the things that we forget when we think about people who, famous people who are famous for their careers, and especially a lot of in the older time, like before 1970s, most of the people who are really, really big in their careers worked all the goddamn time. And Leontyne Price worked all the time. And here's an interesting thing about this. Leontyne Price during that year, so within the first month of her debut, she sang 4 different roles. Now that's not really very usual. You might have a person that they come in and they may sing 2 roles the entire season in their debut. Within 3 weeks, she had sung Aida, she had sung Il Trovatore, she had sung Madame Butterfly, she had sung Don Giovanni. 5 roles. She had sung Turandot. Within the first month, she had sung all 5 of those roles. Does that sound like what we're talking about here? Very much. Okay, but this is for the entire year.
Is it unusual because they wouldn't ask her to?
It was I think.
Is it unusual just to get that much attention? Yeah.
It would only be unusual if you didn't have a voice like hers, in my opinion.
Got it. So she had the voice and she had the work ethic to like pull off all of those parts. Just want to make sure I understand because I don't know opera very well.
Thank you. Good. These are good questions. All of those parts involve lots and lots and lots of preparation. And she had been singing most of these roles for quite a few years. She'd been singing Aida since 1957. She had been singing Tosca since 1954. She had been singing Donna Anna since she had been singing Don Giovanni since 1954 or 55. She'd been singing Butterfly since 58 or 59. You see what I'm saying? So these roles were already behind her. She had already prepared these roles. And somehow she decided that and especially one of the things that I remember my African-American teachers used to tell me when I was growing up, and I studied with an African-American tenor who was at the Met at the same time as Leontyne Price. His name was George Shirley. And he used to say to me, point blank, he said, if it's between you and the blonde boy, you have to be twice as good as that blonde motherfucker in order to be seen as equal. And so
my God, my mom would always say that because she's Persian and short, but same.
She said that about you being a woman, right?
Yeah, or her working in economics, but whatever, same goes. Like twice as good to.
That's right. You have to be twice as good to be seen as on par. And so you know, think Leontyne Price was raised in 1927, was born in 1927 in Laurel, Mississippi, right? Deep, deep South, deep, deep segregated South. And so that means that you went to segregated schools. And one of the things that I remember my parents and all of my older Black friends used to always say is, you know, it's a good thing that we've been desegregated, but there were good things about segregation too, especially when it came to school, because Black teachers really instilled pride in you. And they really instilled this thing that you have to, you know, you're representing all of us. You're representing all of us. You show dignity. You show dignity, and you show that you can do just as well or better. And you're going to have to do better because they're going to see you as less immediately. And so I think that Leontyne Price decided to just lower the hammer on the Met when she came, and say, oh, you think that the people that you've been with, you think the people who have been here before me are good? Look at this. I'm going to do 5 roles in 2 months, 5 roles in 1 month. You know, I think that's what was going on with Leontyne, where she decided, you know what? I'm going to let everybody see everything I can do. Let them see everything I can do. And you know, people were saying this voice is as beautiful as somebody who was singing, you know, 20, 50, 30, 40, 50 years before her. I mean, that's important. Because remember, as a Black person in a European kind of situation, you wouldn't be seen, you shouldn't be part of the lineage. You might be a good singer like a Marian Anderson who was before her. She wasn't even allowed to sing an opera until she was in her 50s, right? And by that time she was past her prime, but she was always kind of off to the side, singing in concerts, singing on the concert stage and in recital. She never was really accepted in the lineage of opera. But Leontyne Price, they would say, oh my God, she has the most beautiful voice since Emmy Justine. Emmy Justine was singing Aida in 1908. She has the most beautiful voice since Elizabeth Reprick. Elizabeth Reprick was singing Aida in 1922, right? So that's kind of the point I'm making. So I'm almost positive, and doesn't this kind of show it? This Venus with the Saturn and the Mars. I'm sure that Leontyne herself decided that, oh, these motherfuckers want to see what I can do. Let them see everything that I can do. Let them see all of what I can do, and let them be amazed. And they were. So what we're looking at then is how this Venus is with the Saturn and the Saturn and the Mars, and how it's in the 11th house, and how the ruler of the 11th is in the 11th, the ruler of the 10th is in the 10th. Now, what was our actual perfection year? What's the moon? Oh, moon. Oh, look at how the moon's on the part of fortune. Oh, and that means that Venus is in an angle from the part of fortune as well. So then what we're looking at is we're looking for Venus. We're looking for the sign of Libra. Where is that? Oh, look at how it's intercepted in the 8th. That's interesting. So that's something that's kind of interesting that maybe I don't really quite know how to look at, but that's kind of an interesting thing. Remember, this is taking us to from February 1960 to February 1961, and January 27 is when the debut happens. So so we can see that the Venus in this area, and remember, it's not just the Venus for the year, it's the Venus for the date of January 27th. Okay? So that's looking at the perfection for Leontyne Price. Now moving to, let's look at the transit for the 27th. Okay, somebody come off of this thing and show me, look at that. Remember what one of the things that they said was, you want to look at the transits to what? The solar return. Bam. Wasn't the solar, all that stuff was somewhere around 20 degrees or something? You know, of course, that makes perfect sense, right? So all of that stuff is there. 7 degrees of Aquarius is where her natal ascendant is. Natal ascendant is at 10. Is that right? So Sun is on the ascendant. Of course, remember the sun. This isn't a solar return, mind you. It's close to the solar return, but it's not a solar return. So the sun is on the ascendant here. The Jupiter Saturn are together. Oh, isn't that interesting? The Mars, who's the natal ruler of the 10th, is on the same sign as the part of fortune in the solar return. Let's see what else. See, I had all of this kind of together. I had it all together at the end of the presentation. But while I was kind of looking at it, I thought, maybe what we need to do is I need to kind of, do it one thing at a time. So from this, we can, like I said, I don't see that there's much going on between the transits and the natal chart, except for the sun on the natal ascendant here. I see the transits happening to the solar return chart. Although you've got the Pluto opposing the Venus and all the other stuff, you've got this Pluto opposing the Venus and the Jupiter really opposing the Jupiter here, right? And so that's kind of interesting. But aside from that, almost all of these things are really connected to the solar return, not the natal chart. So this might be it. This might be part of the thing, is that really the efficacy is transits to the solar return. Let's look at Billie Holiday. So Billie Holiday, now one of the things I read about this, when she was arrested, she was at the height of her commercial success, 1947. So she was at the height of her commercial success. She was winning different polls in different magazines. There used to be a magazine called Downbeat. There's another magazine called Melody Maker. There were basically music magazines, and every year they would have a survey of who was the greatest singer, who was the greatest trumpeter, pianist, etc. And back when I used to get Playboy back in the 70s, they would do this as well. They would have a whole thing where they would basically, they would have you basically choose who you thought were the greatest performers of the year, of that particular year. And so between like 1944 and 1947, she was at least in the top 5. She would almost always be in the top 5. She'd even gotten to #1. Esquire poll, Downbeat poll, Melody Maker poll, all of these different kind of things. She had her largest commercial success with a song called Loverman in 1945, even though she was never a million-selling artist. But she was still able to sell out Carnegie Hall or sell out theaters when she performed. So she was an extremely popular performer, an extremely well-known and popular performer. And 1947 is kind of the culmination of her commercial success. So let's go to, so she's 32 in 1947, which brings us here, right? So 24, 25, 26, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, and 2, which brings us to this Venus. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And of course, we have the Venus and we've got the Venus and the Jupiter and the Mars, just kind of like with, look, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury, just like with Leontyne. It's 12 years earlier, so of course the Jupiter's in the same sign, but we've got the Mars here now, right? And Mars, of course, is the ruler of the 10th, and he's also ruler of the part of fortune. But look at how this Mars is squaring the Saturn, and Saturn is the ruler of the ascendant. So we know that there's going to be some kind of challenge or difficulty in dealing with the life path and with the career, right? So there's going to be some kind of issue in connection to it. And look at how it's connected to the ruler of the 5th. And we know that the 5th are the things that we enjoy. And you know how I talk about Venus, Jupiter as being too much of a good thing. So let's look to see, we're looking for May 16 of 1947. So this is April 7, 1947. This is May 7. So from here, we're now looking for May 16. So this is May 12, right? Because that's 5 days, 2.5 days per. This is May 12. This is May 17. So that's interesting, right? That doesn't necessarily seem like it should be pretty bad. It should have been good. That should be kind of decent. So let's look at the solar return, because one of the things that I did notice was that in the solar return, Remember, we came to a Libra perfection, if you remember. So the solar return perfection for Libra comes to the 12th house, which is the house for what? Prisons. I thought that was interesting. Now, where was the perfection? Where was the Libra perfection for Leontyne? It was here in the 8th house, right? But now we've got it here in the 12th house, and look at how the Neptune is there. And then let's go ahead and look at how we've got the Venus and the Mercury and the Mars all in the 5th house. And look at also how we've got the Mars squaring the Jupiter. Now we've got Mars squaring, oh, is it trining Jupiter? Mars is trining Jupiter, and there's mutual reception happening. So we've got a mutual reception happening in the solar return between the ruler of the 6th, which is bad fortune, and the ruler of the 5th. So, and it's also the part of fortune. So now the part of fortune also rules the 6th house, or the part of fortune, the ruler of the part of fortune also rules the 6th house, and now the part of fortune is in the 6th house. So we can already kind of see that, maybe there might be some not so good stuff at the same time as there's this very, very high growth. This, I mean, look, with the sun on the part of fortune, which she has natally, we can see that, hey, this would be probably a very good year for career and life path. But also in the 6th house, and somebody just was talking about that. Oh, wait, it was Olivia talking about Gary Webb. Olivia was talking about Gary Webb and how his part of fortune was in the 6th. And how would I look at that? And I was like, well, it becomes an ascendant, but it also will still also connect to the 6th house. It will also still have 6th house significations. And so one of the significations for 6th house is bad fortune. So we've got a bad fortune thing happening here. And then now we've also got Mars trining this Jupiter in the solar return. If you remember, when we looked at the perfection, it came to Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. And now we've got this Mars that's trining this Jupiter as well involved in this. Do we have anything else? So this was, and maybe it might not be quite as specific, right? This isn't as mind-blowing as the Leontyne Price chart, but it definitely, there's something that we can kind of see. You know, we've got the Mars here. Hey, what? Go ahead, Layla. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just ask.
Okay, so I was wondering that we discussed a few weeks ago, maybe I'm just too behind, but we did discuss about reception by detriment. And I just noticed that Mars is trining Jupiter, but Jupiter is retrograde. So can he,
So return of virtue. It's not detriment, but
by detriment, yeah.
But it's not detriment, right? Because they're in each other's sign.
By retrograde, yeah.
Yeah, but so it's a return of virtue. And so there's a mutual reception, but maybe that mutual reception. So what are our rules about return of virtue? There's two types, right? There's a return of virtue that is a good type, and then there's a return of virtue that's a not so good type, right? And so for the good type, they need at least one of them needs to be in an angular succedent, and in this case, both of them are. But what's interesting is the Jupiter is basically saying, hey, no, I'm not going to help you, to the ruler of the 6th. But at the same time, they're in a mutual reception. So, but what is it? It's either with detriment or with fitness. It's with fitness or with detriment. So this is a return with fitness, and it's also a mutual reception. So it's going to be kind of a mixed weird reception there, because there's no way of kind of getting around the fact that they're a mutual reception, even though Jupiter is retrograde. So if anything, then now that we know that in this particular chart, the Jupiter is retrograde, which means we know that traditionally retrograde is seen as an impediment. It's seen as a malefic condition. And remember that when we came to the exact date, we came to Pisces. So that means we come to this trine, and we come to this negative, we come to this retrograde ruler, which means that what should be good could turn back and be not so good. Remember, we talk about turning back or returning and things that are not useful instead of being useful. right? And certainly, Billie Holiday was a heroin addict, and so things that we like are not so useful, and they're things that we should be moving away from, but we go back to. Yes? So I think this is more subtle, but I think it does, what I was really looking for was more 12th house connection, but who's the ruler of the 12th house here? Venus.
Yes.
We came to the Pisces perfection, and the ruler of the 12th is in that house for the solar return. So that is looking at profection. Okay, so that's looking at these charts in respect to profection, to how the profection with Leontyne made perfect sense and really like showed itself up. In this particular one, we had to look a little bit more closely. We had to look just a tad bit more closely. The other thing I would be wondering about is the 4th house and the 8th house and that other stuff. But look at how the 8th house is there too. Remember, 8th house is incarceration. There's the ruler of the 8th. 4th house is the capture. There is the ruler of the 4th and the 10th. So just something possible, something to look at. I'm not saying that absolutely this is what's going on, but definitely we've got different indicators that could show. I mean, this looks like, oh, why should this necessarily be bad? But it looks like there could certainly this part of fortune in the 6th points to something difficult. The Saturn in the 10th can point to either hard work or labor or something. And look how the Saturn is not retrograde, but in detriment. So that can point to difficulty. We've got, the ruler of the solar return is with the ruler of the 12th and the ruler of the 8th. That's something. That's important. So the ruler of the solar return is Mars, and the ruler of the 8th is Mercury, and ruler of the 12th is Venus, and all three are together here. So something to be thinking about. Now, if we were to go to Billie Holiday's natal chart and perfect the 12th house, right? So this would be 30, 31, 32. That means now the perfected 12th house ruler is Mercury, who is in the place with Mars. So now we've got the solar return 12th house ruler. We have the profected 12th house ruler with Mars. All right, so that even shows it a little bit more, as we get to that. Okay, so now let's look. Now we'll go to our next thing in the presentation. So Fredaria is very, very similar to Dasha and Bhukti, to the Dasha Bhukti system. So for those of you who don't know what the Dasha Bhukti system is, it's basically it's the main predictive technique of the Vedic astrologers, where they assign a certain amount of years to each planet, and then they also subdivide those years and they give a planet to each of those subdivisions. So Fredaria are this. So Leila Farduzzi, Firdaria. What does that mean? Do you know?
Are you talking to me?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So, far means like glory or brilliance. I think would be a good translation. It has to do with maybe like light. Very common word in Persian. My dad's name is Farzad, means born with glory, or his brother's name is Farrokh. Yeah, it's Persian. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so dar is like the it turns the verb dashtan, to have, into a noun. So literally it means that which has the light, the power, the glory. So I think it has to do with which planet is important. I think it's like a perfection idea, like which one has sort of the power that year.
Yes, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so planetary periods form a vital part of ancient and medieval astrology. The Fredaria, or the years of the Alfredar. Yeah, beautifully done. The years of the Alfredar are Persian concepts and alludes to a system of planetary periods where the life is divided into irregular periods of years with each period being ruled by a planet, luminary, or nodal axis. The quality of that period of time and the style of events was thus dictated by the condition of the planet of the chart. And so now, once again, I just want to kind of let you all know that if you're interested in any of the materials that I'm using, I am selling them, and this one might be one that you might want to use, or that you might want to have. I'm selling them for $8. You know, that's anything, and that's all for anything that I do. All of the stuff I have, all of the materials that I use, that I kind of create for this, and you can buy any of them for $8. And especially though, this one might be useful for you. But if you've already got, you know, if you've got like Johannes Scherner, or if you've got some of these older books, then you won't need it. But otherwise, and then of course there's stuff on the internet that you can find too. But just wanted to let you know that this stuff is available if you're interested. So Sun gets 10, Venus gets 8, Mercury 13, Moon 9, Saturn 11, Jupiter 12, Mars 7, and then the head and the tail of the dragon get 3 years and 2 years respectively, which brings us to 75 years. So Abruni says, now, oh wait, that last one was from Abu Mashar. Abu Mashar is the first time that we hear about Ferdar in astrology. They believe that it, you know, once again, it comes from Persia, and but we don't have anything from that time period that precedes Abu Mashar. The first time that we come across Fredaria is in Abu Mashar. And Al-Biruni says, years of a man's life, according to the Persian idea, are divided into certain periods governed by the lords of these, known as chronocrators. Of course, that's a Greek term. When one period is finished, another begins. First period, okay, so it's different for daytime and nighttime charts. So the first period always begins with the sun in a diurnal nativity, and with the moon in a nocturnal one, and it always goes via the Chaldean order. Does anybody not know what the Chaldean order is? So Ava, do you know the Chaldean order, Christopher? Okay,
I do.
No one, you do, great. Ava? Oh, she might be in and out. I know she sometimes does this from work, so she may be in and out. Okay, so great. So that means that if it starts with sun, then the next one is going to be Venus, then Mercury, then Moon, then Saturn, and I'll show you in a second. The years of each period are distributed equally between the 7 planets. The first 7th belonging exclusively to the chronocrator of the period, the second to it in partnership with the planet next below it, and so on. So what we'll do, oh wait, okay, good. And finally, Bonatti says the same thing. Now, Bonatti, for the most part, quotes Al-Biruni. Ancient wise men considered certain years and nativities, which are not called major, nor middle, not even minor. Now, what he's referring to is the years that are given to a planet. And so, for instance, the moon's greater years are 108, but the moon's lesser years or middle years are 25. And so, in this particular case, he's saying these years that are given to the Fredaria planets do not correspond to the major, middle, or minor years, but they're the years of the Fredaria instead. And so for each planet disposes its own part of the life of the native according to its part of the years of the Fredaria in this method. What kind of nativity it is, the disposition of the years of the Fredaria begins from the luminary whose authority it is, and that luminary disposes the life of the native according to the quantity of its years of the Fredaria, however, not without the participation of the other planets. And here is the Fredaria. So if you have a diurnal chart, who here has a diurnal chart? I think Olivia does. Do you have, Olivia, is your chart diurnal? Yeah, and what about Ferduzi? Leila Ferduzi, are you diurnal or nocturnal?
I'm diurnal, but my last name's Khabiri.
What is it?
Kabiri?
Oh, sorry about that. You're Leila Kabiri. Why?
I'm Ferdosi, yeah.
It's Akbar. It's Akbar's maiden name. Sorry about that. That's why I'm getting this wrong. It's Akbar's married name. You're actually, Akbar is your maiden name, correct?
No, it's my maiden name. It's my dad's name.
Oh, Ferduzi is your actual maiden name. Akbar is your husband. Oh, so Muhammad
I
Akbar.
don't intend on taking his name.
Muhammad Akbar is your husband, not your father. I was thinking the opposite. Got it. Okay, sorry about that, Layla Kabiri. Sorry about that. Okay, so Akbar. Wait. Shit. Kabiri, your daytime chart, yes?
Yes.
Christopher, you daytime or nighttime?
Nighttime.
And okay, perfect. And I think Ava, I don't think Ava's with us at this particular second, but she'll let us know. Okay, so this is what you would be using. Now, I just want to mention that both or rather, there are three people who do this just a little bit differently. Al-Biruni, Bonatti, and Robert Zoller put Rahu and Ketu between the years of Mars and the Sun. And see, as you can see, all of the other authors put Rahu and Ketu at the very end of life. But those two put it, so here's actually the next one. So this is how Al-Biruni does it for nighttime. Al-Biruni, Bonatti, and Zoller do it for nighttime. They put those 5 years represented by the dragon in between Mars and the Sun. And Zoller was kind of adamant about this, but I'll be honest with you. When I first started studying this, I was so excited about Fredaria when I first learned about it, because I've always been into Vedic astrology too. And to be honest with you, I didn't really find it at the time to be that useful. I didn't really find it at the time to be something, like it didn't really I remember using it in the same way that I would have tried to use the Dashabhukti system, and it didn't really work out quite similarly. With me kind of trying to use it to pinpoint certain times when things would happen, it didn't really work. And one of the things that the authors that I have been looking at or mention is that they did not necessarily use these based on their house rulerships. So it wasn't the same like with using the ages of man or the perfection, where we look at the local determination. It was really more about their specific significations. And it goes also back to this concept we've been talking about of Hule and Eidos, or matter, or how matter is turned into form, matter is created, is turned into form, or matter is acted upon and ends up forming something. So how a rock becomes, how the Hule is rock and the sculpture is the Eidos. So the Hule of the sculpture is the rock, and the Eidos of the rock is the sculpture. So it's what the rock has in potentiality that it can become. As a result, they were saying that, for instance, let's say that you're in a Saturn year. Then, of course, Saturn is labor and can be difficulty, but specifically can often be hard work. And so let's say you have a Saturn-Mercury period, so that the way that the hard work manifests is through writing. So maybe during Saturn-Mercury, a person writes a book, because the hard work of Saturn, which want to show up in a mercurial way, right? Or they become a teacher, or they become a teacher, or they go back to school, or something like that, right? So it's something where Saturn and Mercury could both show up at the same time. Maybe if it's a Saturn-Venus, it could be a divorce, right? Because Saturn is cold, Saturn says no, Saturn is difficulties, and Venus is love, and Venus is marriage. So then the hard work is making that relationship work, right? So then the relationship maybe can have difficulties. But we're going to look at this in kind of the same way as we looked at Leontyne and Billie Holiday. So what I want you to do now is I want you to download the 2 PDFs that I put into the chat. And do I have them up? And I'm going to put them up. And then share the screen.
I don't see any PDFs in the chat.
Oh, you don't? I wonder what that's about, because
they're at the very top.
Oh, go to the very top. Can you find them?
The first message I see is from Olivia with the Gary Webb chart. Oh, hold on. Yeah. No, I still don't see him.
You don't see them, they're right underneath that. It's one that says
That's so weird.
Fredaria Abu Mashar, and it's another one that says Firdaria. Okay, well, I'll do it. I'll put it in again.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why I don't see it. No worries, Garth, keep going. I'll just follow what you're showing.
Okay, I just put them both up again. Okay, so this is to show kind of the periods, how long what will happen. And remember, there was another one where it actually showed, it's this one. That's the one. This is the good one, because it shows exactly how many days each period should last. So 156 days for the sun period, 313 days for the Venus period, or 156 to 313. Or no, I guess it is a full 313 days. And then 104 days, 260 days, 52 days, 208 days, and then Sol Marte. I don't know why that's 0 days. I don't know why that comes out that way. But so remember, the sun has 10 years. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. I don't really understand how that got the way that did. I don't understand. I don't actually understand how that come out. But it looked. I kind of just looked at this really quickly and thought that it was more complete than it is, or that I could figure it out more easily. But I don't know. I kind of don't know what's going on here. So sorry. Let's see. But it looks like 52 days for that. 104 days for the Mercury period. Mercury has 13 years. See, Venus only has 8 years, so why would she have 313 days? Because that's 8 months. That should be 8. Oh, that's right. It's 1/7. Each planet gets 100. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand how this works out. So we'll come back to that. Hold on to that. I will come back to that later. What I'll do, I'll come back to that maybe another time, like in another session, to look at this. What I thought I would do instead is go to this Fredaria calculator for the two ladies that we're talking about. Okay, so we're looking first. This is who? Here's Leontyne, 1961. So Leontyne was in a Mars period from February of 1959 to February of 1966. Now, if we remember the chart, Leontyne Price's chart has Scorpio on the midheaven. So this means that the 10th house ruler is basically ruling the period. And if you remember, when we looked at the solar return, Mars was where? Mars was with the profected ruler, right? Mars was with Venus and Saturn. There was that, right? Someone said Venus is besieged, but she was besieged by Saturn in Capricorn and Mars in Capricorn. So in 1960, for this 1960-61 solar return, we not only have an exalted Mars, but that exalted Mars is also the ruler of the natal 10th and the ruler of the Fredar of that year. So this, in my opinion, shows that maybe indeed it's not. You can use the houses. Maybe yes, we actually can use the houses for it. But maybe, maybe because look, she was in a Mars Sun period from February 1060 to February 10, 1961. So she was in a Mars Sun period for that time period. And we know that natally the sun's in the ascendant, right? So the sun is in a place of advancement, and the Mars is in the 4th house. So we've got 2 angular planets. So we've got a period of 2 angular planets for that year. So that should be a relatively important and interesting year. And then, of course, the next year she's got the Mars-Venus. And we know that Venus is in Pisces, Mars is in Taurus, and so that kind of continues on in the way that we know. But from this, we can see that this Mars period is indeed quite important. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Billie Holiday is also in a Mars period. Okay, we're looking at, yep, sure enough, we're looking at from April 7, 1947 to April 6, 1954. And that shows that she was in a Mars-Mars period. So do you remember what we were talking about? How the Mars was with the ruler of the 8th in the solar return, who was also the ruler of the perfected 12th, and he was with Venus, who was the ruler of the 12th in the solar return, but also the ruler of the year. So the ruler of the year was also the ruler of the 12th in the solar return. And she wasn't the ruler of the date. The ruler of the actual date was Jupiter, and Mars was in that mutual reception with Jupiter, and Jupiter is retrograde. So sure enough, this Mars, this Mars-Mars period looks like it showed up as kind of problematic. But remember also, she was at the height of her commercial success. So we've still got the ruler of the 10th, and in Billie Holiday's chart, Mars is the ruler of the part of fortune and the part of spirit. So Mars is a very important planet in this chart, and during this period, quite a lot of difficult stuff happened. So I find that really quite interesting. And I wonder if the natal chart, now what I'd like to do now is go to the natal chart and see if the Mars itself shows up as problematic.
Oh, really quickly, Garth, I am just wondering, based on that last Fredaria calculator, and just kind of finding that, maybe the houses or signs do matter. Like, would you say that it's any closer to the dasha concept in?
I still wouldn't, because you know why? It's not as, because I don't think it's as accurate. And I'm going to tell you why. So I was on Clubhouse in one of the Vedic rooms, and I was telling them about going to this temple. I think I mentioned this last week, about going to this temple in a place in Tamil Nadu called Vaiteeswaram Koil. And Vaiteeswaram Koil is a Shiva temple that has a shrine to Mars. And I told the story about how the minute I took off my shoes, and the minute that I stepped onto the steps going into the temple area, the minute that I stepped onto those steps, I stubbed my toe really badly and drew blood. And of course, the first thing I thought was, oh shit, Mars is most definitely here. Then when I get to the shrine, I go and I wash off my toe, and I go to the shrine, and everyone is arguing. And I was like, whoo, Mars is definitely in this place. And so CSG, who is like the amazing astrologer, he goes, tell me something, Antoine. Were you in Mars Dasha during that period? And I was in Mars Dasha. Not only was I in Mars Dasha, Mars is the ruler of my 12th house. And 12th house is the house of the feet, right? The 12th house represents the feet. I cut my foot at the Mars temple during my Mars Dasha. I don't think anything like that would be showing up. Oh, Dasha, once again, Dasha is a planetary period like this Fredaria. So remember, we were just talking about this. The Dasha Bhukti system is the Vedic system of using planets as periods, for extended periods in exactly the same way as the Fredaria. Right, so he said, oh, were you by any chance in a Mars Dasha? And I was like, I absolutely was. And not only was I in a Mars Dasha, Mars rules the 12th house and 12th house rules the feet. So I don't necessarily think Fredaria can do that. So I don't think so. However, now let's look at this Mars. Oh, that's what, remember, we did mention this. I forgot that I had mentioned that. The square to Saturn. Remember that any planet that's squaring Saturn or Mars, squaring a malefic, it's impeded. Now, in this particular case, this malefic Saturn is also the ruler of the ascendant, but note that it's also the ruler of what? The 12th house. Thus, so this shows a very different thing. Let's look at Leontyne's Mars. right? Because they were both in Mars periods. Mars rules the 10th, very much like Ladies does, like Billie Holiday does. But in this particular case, what we have is Sun squaring Mars. And remember that what happened? Leontyne Price made her Met debut during the Mars-Sun period, but Sun is 10th house, 10 houses away from Mars. So the Sun is in the 10th from Mars. So maybe we could even be looking at it in that way. But here's the thing. I would think, okay, so for instance, if somebody had said to me, when do you think Billie Holiday was arrested? I would have probably said, based on what we know about this chart, I would have said, oh, I bet she was arrested during the Mars-Saturn period. But she wasn't. She was arrested during the Mars-Mars period. But of course, Mars carries. So this is something we've talked about. In any chart, whatever the local determination of the planet, it always carries that determination, right? So we don't just have a Mars, we have a Mars-Saturn square, right? We've got a moon, we have a Moon-Mars sextile and a Mars-Saturn square. So the Mars is going to carry this moon sextile and this square. I'm looking just at the applying aspects at the moment. And then it will also have this connection with Jupiter and Mercury and Venus, right? Because they're all on the same planet. And they're not quite in an assembly, right? The assembly is really happening between Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury. Right, so Venus would have to be at what? Maybe 10 degrees or 9 degrees in order for it to be an assembly, because they need to be within 15 degrees of each other. But so we know that that Mars is involved in this assembly with Jupiter and Mercury, and that Mars is also applying to the square of Saturn, who is the ruler of the 12th house. And Mars is the ruler of the part of fortune and the part of spirit and the midheaven in this chart. So that can show that the fortune, the career, can be squared by 12th house issues, self-undoing, prison, institutionalization. And one of the things we know about Billie Holiday was that she spent much of her life in institutions. She was sent to a reform school when she was 11 or 12. She was basically in and out of reform school type situations when she was a kid. And then it turns out that now from 1947, she was arrested again. She was arrested, I think, in 1949 or something as well. But she was arrested more than once during this Mars period. So it'd be interesting to see if one of the arrests happened during the Mars-Saturn. She also met her second husband during that Mars period, if I'm not mistaken, I think. So it might have actually been the period before. Okay, so that's the use of Fredaria. Now, what we're seeing is that, have we even seen a transit yet? Have we even looked at a fucking transit? No, we haven't looked at a transit. I mean, we did look at the transit for Leontyne. Let's look at the transit for Billie, or for Lady. She was called Lady Day, so that's why I call her Lady. Let's look at the transit for Lady. Well, first, let's look at the solar return. And then let's look at the transit. So let's just get that solar return in our head just to see. So once again, remember this system here, right? Mars is in the same house with the ruler of the 8th, the ruler of the perfected 12th, right? Mercury is the ruler of the perfected 12th, and the ruler of the 12th in this chart, who is also the ruler of the perfected year. This is the Lord of the year. And the Lord of the year in this chart is the ruler of the 12th. The ruler of the ascendant is this planet. And he's with the ruler of the 12th and the ruler of the 8th, which is the ruler of the perfected 12th and the ruler of the year. Now let's look at the transit. Okay. Anything in Pisces? No. Anything in Virgo? No. Anything in Gemini? Yes. We've got that Uranus there. Oh, look at how Gemini. Ooh, that's interesting. So the part of, well, of course, we don't really care about the part of fortune. that stuff in 25, 24. So this one, oh, I remember what I thought about this. Look at that. 25, 26 Aries. That's all on the part of fortune in the solar return. And Mars is the ruler of the, that, is the ruler of the sixth. This is the sixth house of the solar return. And both Venus, who's the ruler of the 12th in that solar return, and the Lord of the year, both Venus and the Mars are on the solar return, are the solar return part of fortune. So once again, I'm not seeing too much, although also this is also the solar return part of fortune is the same as the natal part of fortune. So both of these planets are on the natal and the solar return part of fortune. That was the main thing that I saw in this particular chart. Okay, going back. So then we've kind of talked about the order, what it should look like. And now, zodiacal releasing. Now, I learned something new about this just today, and it wasn't something I myself was using, but it really is useful, and I saw it in both of these charts, and it was really fascinating. Okay, so this is kind of like Profection, except you would use three main points. Now, you can use almost any point, and it might be interesting for us to find a lot of prison or imprisonment or whatever else, or enemies or something like that, or nemesis for Billie Holiday, and to release that zodiacally. What you basically are doing with that is you're doing the same thing that you would do with Profection, but you're starting from the lot of fortune, or the lot of spirit. As you can see, the lot of fortune is body events occurring to you, and then the lot of spirit relates to your career. Because remember, the spirit is called futurorum, right? So things to come, and the lot of Eros, which is relationships. And so what you would do is, first of all, everybody find their part of fortune. And once you find your part of fortune, look at the signs that are angles to it. So for instance, my part of fortune is in Virgo. So the angles to my part of fortune are Gemini, Pisces, and Sagittarius. Those parts, or those particular angles, are called kind of the peak time periods. And they represent when you should kind of be reaching a peak of certain types. Each lot is broken down into chapters, and they are defined by the zodiac sign they fall in, as if your life were a book. Within these larger chapters are smaller chapters, and we're not going to talk too much about the level 2 and level 3 and all of that. This is really just kind of a bit of a introduction to zodiacal releasing, and we will show a little bit of it. Now, it's interesting, Valens mentioned, I remember when I read Valens about this, that you only use the lot of fortune for women, and that you use the lot of fortune for men's body, for what would happen to accidents of the body for men, and then spirit for achievement and career. But why? Because most women didn't work, right? Most women stayed at home. This is the 2nd century. So there wasn't a lot of magistery among women, although there were still female singers and dancers and weavers and makers of clothing and things of that nature. But generally, it was a man's world. It's a paternalistic culture, and it would be really pretty much perceived that only the men would do this. But in my opinion, I don't think that really works. I think that we can use the lot of spirit, and I actually did use the lot of spirit for both of them, and it worked perfectly. So go ahead and use the lot of spirit for career and achievement for women as well. And this is the amount of years for each. So remember, we're using signs, but remember, of course, signs are just extensions of planets. So that means that the signs will have the same years as the planets. So for instance, my part of fortune is in Virgo. My part of spirit is in Aries. So Virgo will represent my first 20 years. Then Libra would represent the next 8 years. So from 20 to 28. Then Aries would be from 28 to 43. Then Jupiter would be from 43 to 55. then Saturn will be for the next 27 years. So as far as my part of fortune is concerned, I'm now in a Capricorn zodiacal releasing for the next 27 years. I just started it. And so if we were using my part of spirit, then for the first 15 years, I was in so from 0 to 15, then going then to Taurus, so 15 to 23, going to Gemini, 23 to 43, going to Cancer, 43 to 68. So I'm in my Cancer. I am now in my Cancer zodiacal releasing for my actual period, and it's a peak period because it's an angle from, it's not an angle from the lot of fortune, it's an angle from the spirit, but not from the fortune. It's a trine from the fortune. Okay, so okay, now we can actually see. This is what I was doing. I had all the charts kind of set up together at the very end. So
really quick, Garth. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You know my name is Antoine, right?
Yeah, Antoine Garth.
But it's okay because Layla Akbar calls me Garth all the time too. So it's actually not a problem. I just wanted to be sure you knew. Continue.
So I was going to ask again, like, would this perhaps be related to the dasha system? And the only reason why I'm kind of asking about this is just you know so much about the Vedic side of things, and there's like a lot of interesting shared history. And so I'm just kind of wondering where the overlaps might kind of occur here.
I think this might be the closest relative. Although, but here's the thing: there's not one dasha. There's not only one dasha system. There's all kinds of dasha systems, and some of them are zodiac related. So this might be closer to what's called the Chara dasha system or the Narayana dasha system, which is based on zodiac signs, on Razi. So it's a Razi based. Razi is the term for a zodiac sign. So it's a Razi based. This is a Razi based dasha system. So in that respect, yes, they're all related. Are they as efficacious? Are they as effective? Are they as accurate? That's the question. Now, I have found this one to be quite accurate. And one of the things that I remember about, yes, Vimshotri, yes. So Vimshotri is the one that's well known. But there are, at the same time, there are, like I said, there's the Vimshotri system, there's Muladasha system, there's Charadasha, there's I think there are like 50 or 60 different dasha systems. There are so many different dasha systems in Vedic astrology, but Vimshotri is the most used, and it's based on the nakshatras, or what we call them, the lunar mansions. Okay, so in this, we're going to zodiacally release the spirit in this chart, and so let's find it. So it's a nighttime chart. So we would go backward. So for the part of fortune, we would go back 120 and forward 11. And sure enough, back 120 and forward 11 is 21 Libra. So doing the opposite, we would go forward 120 and back 11, which would bring us to 30 degrees of Taurus. So the spirit is in 30 degrees of Taurus. It's on the Mars, who's the ruler of the 10th house, which I think is quite interesting. And that also means that, kind of like Billie Holiday, the planet that rules both the spirit and the fortune is the same. In Billie Holiday's chart, it's that Mars-Saturn square that rules it. It's Mars that rules it. In Leontyne's chart, it's this lovely thing between Mercury, Jupiter, and this lovely stellium, or whatever we want to call it, or assembly. It's this assembly that's in charge, right? Much more benefic in that respect, right? So even though there's a square to the Saturn, and the Saturn is also the ruler of the ascendant, right? So the Jupiter is squaring the Saturn, but it's also the ruler of the ascendant. Note that when we came to January 27th, we didn't come to Pisces, we came to Taurus. We came to the Venus signs. Oops. What the hell? Oops. Okay, so what we would, so since the spirit is in Taurus, that's the first 8 years of life. Gemini gets 20 years, so that's 28. she made her debut when she was 34, right? So this is the period, the next 25 years, so 28 to what? 28 to 53 is what I think that is, 28 to 53, which is almost the entire career at the Met. So she started at 34, and then she left at 57. So this almost encompasses the entire career at the Met. So 28 to 53, notice that Capricorn is an angle from Libra, right? So a peak period, right? So looking at the part of fortune, we're looking for angles to the part of fortune for the peak period. Because remember from 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was that we did our part of fortune thing, we know that we can use the part of fortune as an ascendant, right? So, and then we also know that anything that culminates from the part of fortune is, or culminates means 10 houses away, is especially well placed. And look at how the Rahu is there. And Rahu can give serious fame, certainly lust for fame. You know, what do they call him? The agent of ambition. You know, so we can tell that this would be an extremely ambitious time. When did it start? At 28. Oh, so 28. So at 28, Leontyne Price was hired or was chosen to play Bess in the revival of Porgy and Bess that went all over the world. And I remember my parents saw it. I remember my parents actually took me to see another revival of it in 1981. But I remember before that them talking about having seen Leontyne Price sing Bess in Washington, D.C. at the National Theater in 1955 or 56 or whenever it was. And sure enough, that's kind of the beginning of her international career, is this singing of Bess. That's kind of the beginning of the whole thing. And from there, she just goes from strength to strength to strength, from triumph to triumph to triumph, until obviously it culminates with the Metropolitan Opera debut, and not only culminates with the Metropolitan Opera debut, but then becoming one of the most important prima donna of the repertoire that she sang of that particular period. So this really fits as far as that's concerned, if we're looking for, as we are looking for these types of, these particular types of things. Let's look at Billie Holiday. Oh wait, let's look at the next one. Solar return, natal. Okay, let's look at Billie, at Lady Day. So now we're not necessarily looking for career, we're looking for something that happened to her, right? So if we look at it from career, 8 degrees of Scorpio is where the spirit is. And so this is from 0 to 15. From 15 to 27, this Jupiter period, right? Where's the part of fortune? It's in Aries, right? And then from 27 to 27 to 54, now she died at 44. So from 27 to 54 is this next period. Notice that this is the kind of the height of her, that should be the peak period, but also note that the peak period brings us to where? The 12th house. So that because remember what I said in 1947 when she was arrested, she was at the height of her commercial fame. So this definitely points to this period being the height of her commercial fame, but then also being connected to this negativity and this negativity of the 12th house. Now let's look if we can see anything about that with these, with the part of fortune. So 15, 23, 23 to 43. Look at how the Saturn is there. Saturn is the ruler of the 12th. So if anything, I think the Zodiacal Releasing is better than, I think the Zodiacal Releasing and Profection are better than the Fredaria.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
If we want to release from some other lot other than lot of Eros, lot of Spirit, or lot of Fortune, do we simply use that sign to release from that particular?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to
for
use,
example,
so for instance,
yeah,
I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to look to see if we can find a lot that has something to do with imprisonment for her. Ooh, and see if it works out.
Yay.
Okay. So at the worst, we might use the heavy part or the part of Saturn, but let's see if there's anything specific to the 12th house. Because we know that the 12th house is mostly enemies, right? So we've got the first two parts are about enemies. The third is the part of labor and affliction. That could maybe work. And I think that's it. Yeah, labor and affliction. So we can use that as labor and affliction, but also the part of Saturn is called the part of nemesis, right? So serious and weighty matters, which are signified by it, memory and profundity, mind and counsel. Maybe the heavy part makes more sense. Heavy part and account of the serious. Oh, it's the same thing. Oh, I see. Huh. Oh, it is the same. Got it. Okay. Matters that perished or been lost or which was stolen. Let's see, of the dead, native, it signifies condition of lands. No, so let's look at the 12th house then again. I think it might make more sense this one. Labors and afflictions. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Labor endlessly all the day and will not profit from his labors nor enjoy good. Let's see if that one works. So let's see, it's day or night from future to fortune, from future worm to fortune.
I see a lot called imprisonment.
Where?
On AstroSeek, the problem is I don't know if they're citing their sources, where they get these like calculations from, but they have a
Yeah,
few.
because it's with Neptune, so I'm not sure if it really works.
No, not that one. I immediately dismissed for that reason. But there's a different one called imprisonment and sorrow.
And
it looks like it.
What are the two significators for it?
It says ascendant, fortune, and then ascendant again. Can you release two and go back to the ascendant? That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it's basically.
You can?
Yeah, you can, but that sounds kind of weird. That doesn't really sound. Let's see. There's some.
It doesn't sound like it signifies what we want it to, or what we're looking for.
I mean, considering I'm just trying to see if there's anything military and daring strength, skill. These are some that don't belong to houses, and so part of investigation of a thing. Let's see, part of necessity and the delay of things, necessity and delay. Okay, that's the same thing. Okay. Retribution. That sounds might work. Truth and good works. Okay, no. There's some other extraordinary part, or that's the knowledge of them. And then there were some that were for horary. Not that there was no. Okay. Oh, that might be different. There were some that were specific for horary, but I don't see those in here. So maybe that one will. Let's use our 12th house one for, what was it called? Labors and afflictions. I think that works. That makes sense. And it's spirit to fortune.
Yeah.
Okay, so spirit to fortune. Wait, that's the. And that spirit to fortune. Okay, so 8 degrees. So we're in the 9th degree of Scorpio to the 27th degree of Aries. Okay, so that's 150 plus 18. 150, so that give us 17 degrees of Cancer. Okay, so 150 is two Cancer, and then plus 15. Is that right? 8 to 27. Is that right? Plus 18. It's plus 19. 9 to 27. 18 plus 18. So it should be 21 degrees. Sorry, 21 degrees of Cancer, but still in the sign of Cancer. Okay, so. So zodiacally releasing this would be the first 25 years. Then the next would be 19. So it would be during this period, this sun period. So no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It really makes more sense because look how the sun is on the part of fortune. No, it doesn't really work. So really, it makes much more sense when we use the part of fortune. And this might be why they limited. This might be why they limited some of these. The other thing is that, remember, they continued creating parts. So that part of labor and affliction, that might not have been in balance. That might not have been a part when Valens was around. That
Do
might
you
have been
have
a
sort of
part.
like a hierarchy of which ones you use, like Valens, in terms of when they were created or what they're used for? Because there's a lot of horary points that I don't know if that would like help you delineate a natal chart, or would it?
Two things in that to answer your question. I do have a hierarchy. Ultimately, because and so do they. The hierarchy is that the part of spirit and the part of fortune are the most important. So those are they are the ones of prominence, and the part of fortune is the most prominent, right? Because the part of spirit is also called the part of hidden things, the part of the future, right? We can't always see the future, right? So it's always about kind of what's coming that we don't know about. You know, what's possible that's what we're not able to actually see, but which may come into being. That's part of spirit. Whereas part of fortune is very much kind of what's tangible, what tangibly will happen, what tangibly could happen to us. And so I think that's why the part of fortune is really, the one that we should be using. Now you can use the ascendant too. You could zodiacally release the ascendant, but what is zodiacally releasing the ascendant called? It's called perfection. Right? It's called perfection. So there's no real need to kind of do that. Yes, it depends on the thing. Like if the question is about marriage or love or whatever, generally, in horary charts, I generally just look at the part of fortune. But sometimes if it's a money question, I'll sometimes look at the part of substance. But remember, the part of fortune is the primary indicator for substance, even more so than the part of substance. So once again, it has all of the significations in it. And so that's one of the reasons that it's that much more important than everybody else. So I say experiment with it. I certainly have. And or for instance, if somebody asks about children, I definitely look at the part of children. So I think whatever the question is about, you should feel comfortable. I would feel comfortable doing a part for that thing. If the person asks about money, I look at substance and fortune. If the person asks about children, I look at the part of children. If they ask about illness, I look at the part of azimine. If they ask me about their brothers or sisters, you look at the part of brothers and sisters or mother or father. Ultimately, delineation is looking at the house, the ruler of the house, the planet in the house, the part that's related to the house, the compound almutin related to the house. So all of those would be all of the significators. The triplicity ruler of the house, right? All the because the different triplicity rulers represent different things. Remember, so those would be all of the things that we would be looking at just for one situation to get confirmation to make judgment. So I know that Olivia has the chart of Gary Webb, who was a journalist. Oh, where is that? Go to the chat. And did you get the date that he died, Olivia?
Yeah, it should be on that chart. It was like the 10th. Where is it?
Taking a moment to open.
10th of December 2004.
10th of December 2004. So Gary Webb was an investigative journalist who discovered that the CIA was behind the crack cocaine epidemic. Essentially, the CIA was basically one of the main drug dealers in the United States, and that they were releasing crack cocaine into inner cities. And think about kind of the United States and Afghanistan, us going into Afghanistan. And if you remember that when we started in Afghanistan, the Taliban had cut most of the the poppy plants are what create heroin. And so poppy production was way down. when we invaded for the first time. Within a year of us being there, poppy production was at record levels. So the CIA has been known for having child trafficking organizations in order to blackmail people. Is known for you know, the MK Ultra thing, which was the brainwashing thing. Was known for this cocaine trafficking and heroin trafficking. You know, so the CIA, this whole kind of black ops CIA thing, was kind of a major thing. And so he basically found out about this and supposedly committed suicide. So wait, it was December. So this is the transit for the day of his death. So let's start with Profection. So he was born 1955, meaning that he was 49 when he died. So this is 48. Oh, but we want, okay, so, oh, I wish we had a whole sign chart for this for now. So Sagittarius would be 48, Capricorn is 49. Let's look at Saturn. So one of the things we see here is that Jupiter and Saturn are what? Jupiter and Saturn are squaring each other without reception. And as far as whole sign is concerned, it looks like Jupiter is also the ruler of the 12th house, although Mars would be the natural ruler, right? Because he'd be the natural ruler of the 12th. And he's not necessarily involved with it. Who's the ruler of the part of fortune? Mercury is the ruler of the part of fortune. That's right. Because, oh, that's right. This was that Casimir Venus within 7 minutes degrees of the 7 minutes of the sun, and the Mercury there. Yes.
And I don't think that we can see the chart right now. It's Billie Holiday.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. You see it now?
Yep, looks good.
Fabulous. Sorry about that. All right. So now he was killed. He was murdered. I think he was murdered. They said that he committed suicide. Now, with a chart ruler squaring Saturn, there could be depression, right? There could certainly be depression and difficulty. But note that the Saturn is in Scorpio, which is the whole sign 12th. So that would say that the Saturn could also be, it could be the self-undoing, but it could also be the nature of the person who is their unseen enemy, and Saturn represents government. Jupiter is squaring the Saturn, so now it's a separating square, but pretty close, right? So Jupiter is squaring the Saturn, so we know that there would be tension between the person and the government. So the wife said he was very depressed at the end, but she only did surface research. So it is possible that he did. It looks like it's possible either way here. It looks like it's possible either way. Interesting also, remember the 10th house is government, and how the Mars, the ruler of the 12th, is with the ruler of the 10th. And Sun is also the Sun is the king, right? And also look at how the Sun is hiding. So remember that when a planet is Casimir would make it kind of very prominent. Oh, that's interesting. This is how I think this Casimir is working. Okay, so remember that planets that are combust or under the rays are hidden from view. Right? Because basically it's the rays, the sun's so bright you can't look at it, right? So when a planet is with the sun, you can't see either of them. Or rather, you can see the sun, but you don't want to look directly at the sun. That means you can't see the planet that's there. But when a planet is Casimir, then the planet is in the heart of the sun. And so it sits on the sun's throne with it. And so it's foisted into visibility. And so we could maybe even say in this particular case that this person might have foisted the unseen aspect of the government into visibility. That could be the Casimir of this chart. So he made what was invisible about government visible. He made the invisible workings of the king visible, right? The sun's the king, Venus is the 10th house ruler, which is government or kingdom, right? So king and kingdom are together in this chart. But kingdom is hidden. So it's a hidden kingdom that the king has. And the hidden kingdom of the US government is the CIA. And sure enough, and then also look how it's also connected to the 12th house. So 12th house is hidden enemies. Oh, well, I got kicked out. 12th house is hidden enemies. Venus is government. Sun, both of these planets are hidden from view. Yeah, you know, it's possible that this was just a good old depression that killed him off. It's possible. I mean, I'm always so cynical that I just believe naturally that, you know, that he was murdered. And because people are suicided all the time. You heard about Jeffrey Epstein dying in jail. I think they even said that he committed suicide, found dead, committed suicide. He was obviously killed. Same thing with Jean-Luc, what's it, Jean-Luc, the one that used to, God, what's that guy's name? Jean-Luc Brumel.
Oh,
Jean-Luc Brumel. Yeah, Jean-Luc Brumel. Jean-Luc Brumel was known for drugging and raping underage models, and and for procuring girls for Ghislaine and for Jeffrey Epstein as well. And he was just found dead. Ghislaine is still alive. She's in jail, but she's still alive. But which is interesting. We'll see how long it takes for her to get suicided, for her to commit suicide. You know, she might. But remember, her father died. Her father, Robert Maxwell, turns out that he was a Mossad double agent. He was a Mossad double agent, and he died mysteriously falling off the back of a yacht. So I wouldn't be surprised if her days are numbered too, to be honest with you. So let's look at the perfection. We looked at where did we go? So this is 48, 49. So it was when he was 49. He's born in August 31. Okay. So August, and when did he die? August 30. He died December 10. Okay. August 31, September 31. No, August 31, September 31. Oh, not September 31. That would bring us to October 1. October 31. See, this is where it gets weird when you got October versus. So I'm just gonna go skip through months, because this is when it gets tricky. All right, this is when it gets kind of weird and tricky. We know that this is the 49th year and the 31st of August. There is no 31st of September. We're just going to pretend there is. There is a 31st of October. There is no 31st of November, what we're going to pretend there is. There is a 31st of December, so it has to be somewhere in between this period. It has to be in this period. So if this is November 30 or December 1, let's say this is December 1, December 6, December 11, December 16, 21, 26, 28. Oh, wait. Oh, wait, 28, 26. Oh, sorry about that. I forgot that we were, okay, so wait, this is December 1, 6, 11, or 10. So it's here in this area. So it's either here where this Virgo is, where all that stuff is. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go with it here. It's here where all this stuff is, or it's even here where with sign ruled by Leo, or ruled by Leo with the sun, where all this stuff is. So either way, it points to that triple conjunction, which leads me to believe that he was killed and did not commit suicide. Right? Because we were already talking about the king, the hidden kingdom, and the hidden enemies. So yes, I think that indeed he would have been probably murdered.
I was thinking something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can't we Holiday, like just for experiment, can't we use Holiday for questions like this? Like if we really think that did he die by suicide, or was he actually killed? Can't Holiday be used for?
the problem with using horary for something like that is we don't have any personal connection to him. His wife could.
Ah,
His
right.
wife could.
I also saw Lee Lehman lecturing about this once, and she mentioned something about how, like, if it's a public person like that, how do you know that you're the first person to have asked the question?
That's
Yeah.
right.
That didn't really make sense. Yeah.
Yep. But in my opinion, it comes. If let's say he were missing. Now, if he were missing and we wondered if he were dead, we could do it. But for instance, like for me to just wonder, one of the important things about horary is that it has to be really pressing on your mind. It has to be really pressing on your mind. I don't give a shit about Gary Webb. You know, I mean, I'm glad that he was alive and I'm glad that he uncovered this stuff, but he's not somebody pressing hard on my mind. You know, I mean, I'm curious. It would be a curious thing, but horary wouldn't really be able to. What we could do instead is we could do a horary chart where we say, is my belief correct about
Ah,
this? Right? And so am I correct in my belief about his death? And that might be useful. But as far as was he killed or did he commit suicide, I think only his wife or mother or somebody connected to him would be really able to ask that question.
Isn't there also a triplicity ruler that talks about circumstances of death? Like the third ruler of the...
Yes, there is. Very good question. It's the first triplicity ruler of the 8th house. That's a great question.
First of the 8th.
And as a matter of fact, also the 8th house shows generally how the person dies. And the 8th house has Leo in it, which is ruled by the sun. And it's a daytime chart, so the sun is the first triplicity ruler. All of this stuff, once again. And notice, remember, we've been talking about the 4th house as the house of secrets. Notice that he rules the 4th house, which is the house of secrets. His whole thing was about uncovering secrets. Let's see where. So we know that the fortune is Gemini. Let's see where the spirit is. So moon. So it's moon to sun. So it'd be what, 210 minus 13. 210 minus 13. So that's what, 11? 11 Cancer. So that is what was it I was just looking for? Why did I just do that? Oh, spirit. That's the ruler of the spirit is that one. I was looking to see if spirit was one of these 3 planets in case, but it's not, it's the moon. Well, let's zodiacally release it, right? So let's zodiacally, because we're looking for something that happened to him. So we're going to do fortune. So this is 20. He died at how old? 49. So this is 0 to 20. This is 20 to 45. It happened during this period, 8th house. It happened during this period, this Leo period. I think he was killed. Note that it doesn't, I mean, although you've got the Jupiter, you've got the part ruler in the 8th, you've got the chart ruler rather in the 8th house here, right? So which could point to, you know, self, and then of course, which includes that unfortunate square, but just this thing here, that's just really something about that. Bye, Christopher. Thanks so much for coming.
Would knowing what dasha he's in help? You've gotten me all interested in Vedic.
I say look at it. Look at it and come back to it.
Yeah.
Here's this information. Yeah, give it a look and come back. Okay. So that's where we are with the predict. So the main thing that we're realizing is that transit ain't shit. Or rather, on its own, transits ain't shit. The other thing we're seeing is that in all of these cases, it was the transits to what? The solar return that was really showing up, not necessarily the natal chart. That's fascinating. And like I said, Robert Zoller says if you're using a lunar return, don't use your natal position, use your solar return position. What was the guy's name again? Oh, his name was Gary Webb. Garywebb. Were you able? Do I need to put it back up, or did you get his information? Bye, Ava. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, you're welcome. So if you're interested in donating, you're totally welcome to. I will send you. Here's the PayPal that you can send it to, Garthastro at garthastro.com, and then I'm Antoine Garth for Cash App. Thanks so much. If you're interested in doing that. Also, once again, if you want the materials, $8 for the materials here as well. Okay. So what did we get from today? Layla Akbar.
Well, we found out that not everything is about Pluto/Uranus/Neptune transits that keep happening for decades and decades, and basically is the reason for everything that is screwed up in your life. It could be zodiacal releasing, it could be Fredaria, it could be many other things.
Many other things, definitely.
Yeah.
Layla
The
Kabir.
cosmos are out there to screw us all.
Yeah, and working on it's cycles within cycles. It's cycles within cycles within cycles.
Yeah,
and
it's my turn today, it's your turn tomorrow.
Absolutely. Kabiri, what did you do today?
Just the way that you can take something like Firdaria period, or like in your case, zodiacal releasing, and sort of how you can go through and do the interpretation is something that I'm still having trouble with. And I think with some of the examples, like with Leontyne and with the lady, they were shown sort of beautifully how accurate it can be, how descriptive. I really like that part.
Yeah, me too. And Olivia.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was most impressed by the Firdaria thing. I missed a little bit at the start, so I was a bit confused, but I'll have to look back at that. I have a question though. With which technique would you start?
I would start with zodiacal releasing and profection. I would start with profection and zodiacal releasing. Those are the easiest to kind of get into.
Right.
Yeah, I would start with those because basically you're just, because you know what I found when I first started reading professionally, I found that I didn't really ever use transits or anything else. All I used was perfection because it became this fun game. Because I would put my finger on the place it started and I'd be like, bam, 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 and they could do it with me. Oh, boom, boom, boom. Oh, and it ends up here. And I'll tell you this. Remember I told you I had that client who was a good friend who didn't want to have a reading with me because she thought I knew too much about her already. And then I was able to tell her that her brother had died of a brain disease, and had no idea that she even had a brother, but was able to tell her that. At that same reading, I was able to, within a month, tell her when she would get pregnant using only perfection.
Damn, dude. I think I found that guy's Dasha period.
Okay.
It looks like, sorry, I'm double checking because my math is terrible. So I just plugged it into Astroseek to his birthday. It looks like it was a Saturn ruled period with, I don't know what you call it, but like sub ruler, I guess, in Mercury.
So now here's the only problem with this is that you really need to be using Vedic interpretive technique. It's going to come to a completely different way of looking at things.
Right.
Like we can't really apply the Dasha Bhukti to the Western chart. We can if we were to look at the Vedic chart. What I would maybe have you do is create his Vedic chart, and then
that's the reason for my laziness is I'm pretty sure Astroseek uses the Navamshas. So you put in the birthday and it plops out like a sidereal calculation, and from there, because it says Shravana Nakshatra, so it takes the moon somehow, and then I think it starts the sequence from there. But I don't know shit about Vedic, so if I'm getting this wrong, please stop me.
It does. No, that's exactly right. So it's a nakshatra-based system, and the nakshatra that the moon is in at your birth is your birth nakshatra. So it starts with the planet that rules the nakshatra that you're born in. So he should have been born with a balance of the moon dasha,
Yes. Yeah.
So it should start with moon dasha. So you're probably correct. But what we would need to do is we would need to be looking at what's going on with Saturn. You know, everything shifts, right? So more than likely he's no longer, I don't even know what his rising sign was, but more than likely he's no longer whatever, he's still Sagittarius rising because he's late degrees. So, but the Saturn would have moved into Libra. So the Saturn would have moved from the 12th house into the 11th house. You see what I mean? And everything else is moving as well, which means that Saturn rules different. Well, he still rules the second and the third. Now, the second house is called, the second and the seventh houses of the Vedic chart are called Madaka Sthana. And Madaka means death. Those are the death houses. So unlike we use the eighth house for death, they use the eighth house and the third house, which is the eighth from the eighth, for longevity. They use this, and then they use the 12th house from those two houses as the death houses. So the 12th house from the eighth is the seventh house. The 12th house from the third is the second house. Those are the two death houses. So already Saturn is a Madaka Sthana. So Saturn is the ruler of the second. And notice that if it is Saturn Mercury, Mercury is the ruler of the seventh. So we've got the two Madaka Sthanas. We've got the period of the two Madaka Sthanas happening. That doesn't tell us. That doesn't tell us how he died. That tells us, but it definitely points to, I bet this motherfucker dies now, right? That definitely can point to that. So this is why I'm saying, this is why I said what I said when I started. The most accurate, the most kind of on the fucking money you can do a prediction and be on it is going to be the Dasha Bhukti system, period. But you got to be able to read a Vedic chart to read the Dasha Bhukti system. But after that, Zodiacal Releasing and Profection, in my opinion.
Cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does, definitely. All right, any other questions? Oh,
okay, last topic. Oh yeah,
what?
sure, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
yeah, but
wait, one second. I lived in San Francisco for 18 years, by the way. You've got my hometown in the background.
It's my hometown. I grew up in Oakland.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh God, I had no idea.
I lived there from like 7 to 18, and then again, right, like during my Saturn return, I moved back in with my parents when I was in Oakland. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I lived 25 until 43. Well, 25, yeah, to 43. Well, yeah, well, I within that time I moved to Thailand and then came back, but I was there the whole time from 91 to 2008 or 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Man, imagine we could have met. That's when I was there too.
Yeah, I know, because you're so much younger than I. We definitely could have met. I could have been your baby.
No, but I was there from mid 90s to 2008. That's when I went to college.
Did you go to college in San Francisco?
No, I went far away. I went to New York. Yeah.
And you live in Barcelona now, or in London? Where are you?
Madrid.
Okay. Madrid is the best place to live in Spain. I definitely found. Barcelona is great to visit, but because the Catalans are so weird, Madrid is really better, and also has so many people from everywhere. Okay, Akbar, what were you trying to say, honey?
Yeah, you mentioned that the best time to ask a horary question is when you're